Welcome to Real Herbalism Radio, show 142. Today's show is brought to you by Sue Sierra Lupe.
Sierra Lupe Herbal Consulting is open for business. I am a certified clinical herbalist who started practice in 2006, and I offer in-home and distance consultations, custom formulations, and holistic care in conjunction with existing diagnosis and medication. Contact me at sue@thepracticalherbalist.com.
Ace High Heat Graphics, custom imprinted shirts and hats and pants and everything else. You can put a logo on it. If you can put some art there, they can put it on it for you. Visit them at acehighheatgraphics.com. Candace Hunter Creations, or actually Get Healthy Now with Candace.
Get Healthy Now with Candace. Candace is able to do herbal consulting with folks both near and far. If you're interested in exploring some natural alternatives to deal with the healthcare issues you've got, or building fitness and preventing healthcare problems, give Candace a shout. You can find her at gethealthynowwithcandace.com or CandaceHunter.com.
And Occupy Medical.
Occupy Medical is a free street reach integrated health clinic in Eugene, Oregon. We are proving that healthcare really is a human right. We are 501c3. Contact us at occupy-medical.org. Hunter
Creation, graphic design and website designers, putting your marketing ideas to life. Contact them at huntercreation.com for everything from business cards to brochures to posters to websites. They got you covered. huntercreation.com. And the Herbal Nerd Society.
The Herbal Nerd Society is the way that we keep this podcast going, and our website, The Practical Herbalist. You can sponsor us and at the same time learn every month about a brand new herb in very interesting ways.
Herbal Nerd Society is a low-cost, paid-for membership, and all the proceeds go toward supporting Real Herbalism Radio, this amazing podcast, and the Practical Herbalist website. Join us now.
All right. So, without any further ado, on with the show. Desert herbs have begun to call to more and more of us. These powerful plant allies, however, have been a well-kept secret of the Southwest, which makes them a challenge to try out. They beckon us to get out and wildcraft for the privilege of using them. Today we're talking with Christina Sanchez, cosmetologist, desert wildcrafter, herbalist, and founder of Every Leaf Speaks about gathering and using desert herbs with the care and respect they deserve. Now here are your hosts, Candace Hunter and Sue Sierra Lupe.
I'm Candace Hunter.
And I'm Sue Sierra Lupe.
And welcome to Real Herbalism Radio. Christina, welcome back.
Thank you. Hi. Nice to be back. Thank you.
This is the perfect time of year to start thinking about getting out and using some desert herbs. Because I have noticed that there's like no good sources online for them.
Yeah, it's tough to find some of these, you know, and some of the times I've gone to even reliable sources for these desert herbs, and I get the bag in the mail and I look at it and say, oh,
what's this?
This is old and sad.
Look, it has no flavor or color.
I have nothing against old and sad, as I am sometimes old and sometimes sad in combination. So that's not my bias.
But that's not what you want in your medicine, right?
Right. Yep, that's correct.
I love that. Okay. No, it's true. I haven't found desert herbs available online, unfortunately. There's only one herbalist that has an online store that I found where I have to source one of the plants because it is threatened, Yerba Mansa, and it's through Voyage Botanica. That's Michael Cunningham's website. And yeah, he does offer a lot of desert plants on his website, but not too many folks are doing that. And I'm gearing up for that, to offer online sales, to buy in bulk.
Mm-hmm. Now that one is particularly delicate.
We will make sure that we provide that link online for those of you like myself who may not actually get down to the Southwest to do any wildcrafting anytime soon. But you know, if you can, you should. I mean, now is the perfect time of year to get down there and get started, right?
At least
definitely.
You don't have to wildcraft an entire bucket of something.
No,
just a couple of leaves, just to familiarize yourself with it,
right?
And to see it in its environment. I think that's one of the things that wildcrafters especially students, keep making the mistake of doing all the time. Like, I have to collect this, I have to collect it, I have to use it. I'm like, Or you just have to get out and familiarize, bring a little bit back with you.
The very first,
pictures.
the very first desert herb I worked with was creosote bush. And I had literally one
there's a ton of
2-inch
that.
sprig that I brought back from me when I was with me on the airplane, because I had to go on an airplane. But I had this one little 2-inch sprig, and I worked with that for like 6 months, more like aromatically, and I would have like a single leaf off of it. These leaves are tiny, people. They're really, really tiny. So I'd be like one little leaf because I wanted to be careful and preserve it. So at that time in my life, I knew absolutely nobody in the desert. So it's not like I could, write, oh, could you please send me a 2-inch sprig?
Right.
I mean, I didn't have anyone to rely on. But it doesn't take a lot when you're first getting to know the plants.
No,
less is more, definitely.
So what are some of the if you're harvesting and using yerba mansa, what do you recommend for first time people?
Well, what I recommend is to not harvest, do not wildcraft yerba mansa, leave it alone. Because of the droughts, climate change, it's not growing as it used to. It loves swampy, kind of boggy areas, and I've noticed colonies, but I don't touch them. If you can't grow your own, if you can't grow your orange, if you can't grow your own, then there's websites. For instance, I did mention Michael Cunningham's website. He does sell bulk yerba mansa dried. So you could yerba mansa root and yerba mansa leaf and flowers. So that's what I do is I order from Michael Cunningham's website. There is yerba mansa here in the high desert. There is a place that I know where it grows. I don't tell anybody about it. It's a secret. And there's a great little it's called Cactus Mart. It's this wonderful place that focuses on desert plants and drought tolerant plants. And if you can grow your own, I encourage folks to visit Nicole at Cactus Mart and buy these plants that, it's not like, for instance, white sage. It's also another threatened species, and it's over harvested, unfortunately. So I encourage folks to don't harvest, because a lot of people want to make smudge wands. It's more medicine that I'm interested in. So I tell folks to just source from other resources and do not harvest from that.
White sage is one of the ones that I've decided that I wasn't going to buy any more of those kinds of smudge wands. I'm using the sage I grow in my own garden, which is culinary, true, but it's my local garden and it's my local sage, and it seems to do a wonderful job of clearing space.
Yeah.
So
also in our
it's
area,
working.
We have the Western red cedar. And that makes a fine
that works really
smudge
well
as well. We have a lot of cedars out. We have true cedars out here as well. We're very lucky to have that, the incense cedar. So using what you have in your area is part of that spiritual walk is walking, going out there and familiarizing yourself with your bioregion and use what obviously please don't use a toxic plant to smudge with. That would be a poor idea.
Yeah, one thing that I do want to say is like people like creosote bush, it's been used in shamanic journeys and ceremonies. But the thing is that like if you use creosote bush indoors, it's actually toxic. So I do encourage folks when they're starting with wildcrafting to do research, because you don't want to harvest something that you think that you could work with, and it might be actually toxic.
Right. But in Artemisia, there's a ton of artemisias that grow as weeds around here. The California mugwort, for example. And that's something that in traditional Chinese medicine they use that as smudges as well. So there's no reason to have to put any kind of influence on some of these more delicate plants when you have these naughty little visitors that are taking root and shading out some of our more delicate natives. You use them. Just go ahead and use them. Why not? They're lovely to use.
So I want to get back to the idea of desert wildcrafting, though, and the herbs that are actually okay, and how to do it, properly in the desert, because the number of plants in the desert is considerably different than what you find, in my backyard, or in a lot of our regions where we're not in desert areas. I mean, there's just fewer of them. So what are some, besides creosote, because you said that's a really an abundant one, right?
Yes, creosote is in abundance here. One thing, desert lavender is something that I like, something that I work with. It's an herb that I like because it helps ease anxiety, tension. It's something, if I have an upset stomach, if I'm feeling a little swollen, a little pain from my joints after climbing, this is something that I can work with as in a tea form. It's also antifungal. One thing I want to talk about is that we didn't discuss this in the last time I was visiting with y'all, but yoni steaming. I actually have yoni steam with desert lavender. And because she is an antifungal, it's been used for sitz baths in the past for any type of yeast infections, but I made an herbal blend and creosote bush was one of them that was in it, and ladies mantle as well. But I did a yoni steam with it and it seemed to help, I had cleared up pretty quick after. I'll never take medication again if I don't have to, but taking antibiotics and secondary infections are horrible. Yeah. And rather than taking more medicine, I just explored with desert lavender and it did work. It was awesome, but it's something that I like to work with because I notice it helps speed up the healing process of cuts and wounds and abrasions. So I like her. But one thing I noticed is that folks, when people are learning how to wildcraft, they need to learn to leave the plant as if you were never visiting. It had never been touched.
Yeah.
And especially because of the lack of water and how the harsh, it's so hot here in Joshua Tree and in the desert, it's just period. It's like, we don't get enough water. And so I always have a ceremony, and before I, take from the plant, I always ask permission. I have, this process that I do for wildcrafting, but it's, I've seen some people, I went wildcrafting once with somebody and they didn't know how to do it. So I had to teach people, so it's like when you're taking from the plant, it's like, make sure you do a lot of reading about how to harvest. And there's a really good book by Charles W. Kane and then Michael Moore's Medicinal Plants. I love that book. And then Medicinal Plants of the America Southwest is one by Charles W. Kane, who I love because they tell you how to harvest. They tell you when's the prime time, the season to do it. And they tell you what's medicinal of the plant. So education is the main thing. Just don't go out there and harvest because you heard desert lavender is going to work for you. You need to know like what part of the plant is. And so that you don't destroy the plant.
Just like you wouldn't be just sticking random things on your body. Just
say, exactly,
I have a mild pain here. I think I'm going to stick this on.
Spray some Windex on it.
Yeah, just put some Windex on it. For those that don't know, that's Windex from the movie.
Cures everything.
My Big Fat Greek Wedding. That's an allusion to that. If you haven't seen that movie, it's kind of a fun one. And we're not recommending Windex as a cure-all either. It's just, we're making a joke, folks. So listeners, keep those emails aside for a second.
Well, there's one point that I remember last fall that you had on your Instagram. You had a series of pictures talking about how you should not be hanging things from Joshua trees.
Oh, people do that?
Yes. And I thought that was something that, folks who are not from the desert really need to understand. The plant structures of the desert are really different, radically different from what you find, in the forest. So tell me about the Joshua tree and tell me what that was about. What was going on
there?
All
right. So there was a music festival here. There's a lot of music festivals in Joshua Tree. Just festivals, period, that have been happening a lot more lately than they used to. And with that, it's drawing people from the city, the concrete jungles that don't know enough about how to behave in nature. Right. And this is something that strikes a nerve with me. I get very passionate. So that post you saw, I blogged about it. So people think that Joshua trees are actually trees. They're not, they're actually, their root system is very shallow. Mm-hmm. And because of the drought, because of, they exist, we have winds that could be up to 70 miles an hour up here. Right. And these Joshua trees are still alive. They're uprooted, but they tip over. And then these people come to the national park and they walk all over them. They're doing yoga. They think they're being cool and they're Instagramming all this stuff. So I'm part of a group called the Guardians of Joshua Trees. Nice. And we basically find posts by people that are hashtagging Joshua Tree, and we see posts of them causing more harm, because just because the plant is down, the tree is down, or this is not a plant, it's actually a succulent, doesn't mean that it's dead.
Right.
And so we're trying to educate people in the most kindest of ways, just to please refrain from posting photos like that, because it's encouraging to other folks to do things like this. And so for me, these Joshua trees are special. If any weight on them will actually break one of the arms.
Right.
So they're very fragile, and it's not, that's something that I through education, that's one thing, like wildcrafting through education. But there was this one person that was reluctant to, delete her video of her hanging hammocks. People are hanging hammocks.
Right.
They're hanging, shoes, clothing, and all of this weight over time. We just don't want to encourage that kind of behavior. And people that are, folks that live up here, the community, we're very passionate about keeping the desert as healthy and preserving and maintaining. And it's through education that I find is going to be helpful.
Well, I'm thankful that you do that. And I'm thankful that you're, talking to us a little bit about, because of like I said, the plant structures and the way that plants grow in the desert is really radically different from a vast majority of the rest of the country. I mean, in Nebraska, if you happen across something that looks tree-like, most likely it is actually a tree, and it may most likely be able to sustain the weight of your shoes, your clothes, whatever.
Your hammocks.
The hammocks.
Your
if it's of the same size trunk as a Joshua tree's trunk, then in, Montana, it's going to be strong enough to hold it up, and it's certain. Yeah. And certainly in most of our cities, most cities, even desert cities, we've transplanted a lot of those types of trees and plant structures, and then we water them sometimes irresponsibly. Sometimes it is irresponsible what we've done, but most of us who have grown up in the cities, we're not used to seeing what the desert plants look like. We're not used to seeing how do you properly, like the idea of creosote bush, and it's all over the place, but that doesn't mean you have to harvest as much of that as you would dandelion in the city. Dandelion, you're going to harvest tons of it, because for one thing, it's all over the place and it's easy, but that's the level that you use it at. Whereas creosote, you're using very, very small amounts because it's intense.
Potent.
Yeah.
It's so potent. Yes, definitely is. Yeah. And another thing that people don't understand about the Joshua trees is, they don't live here. They come here to visit, they come to hang out, they go to festivals, they come to some popular, venues out here. They don't know how to behave in nature. And this is something that I have an issue with. I'm like, don't come here. Don't be out, stay in the city if you don't know how to behave in nature. But I really am I'm a eco warrior when it comes to stuff like this. It makes me really upset when I see people walking off trails. So if you're going to go harvesting someplace, you want to make sure that you're not stepping on soil that, might have little plants growing. You just want to be cautious of where you're walking and stepping, and don't walk on plants and how much to take. But the Joshua tree issue, that's something that it's something that folks are not understanding. And it's like, I don't know what it's going to take for people to understand that these are not trees. They're actually plants. They can break very easily. They're so fragile and delicate.
Take a while to grow.
Their core, it takes forever to grow, but their core, it's almost hollow. So I hate to say this.
I think the work you're doing is really helpful. I wonder too if maybe starting to do more like leading nature walks and that sort of thing for festival goers might be a helpful thing. Because you can educate
if they
them.
Weren't hungover.
Yeah, I know, right?
If they weren't hungover, then that would be a great option. But I do feel that education, that might be something that we could work with, because one of the promoters of this popular festival that happens in town brings in a lot of folks that are just,
Burning Man style.
They're hipsters. They're not nature people. So, they get out here and they just don't understand. So we've actually gone back and forth with these promoters, because since their festival, we're seeing so many people hashtagging this festival's name, as well as, they're hanging their hammocks from Joshua trees. So it'd be great if we could somehow work together to educate people as to how to respect Mother Nature.
This is the curse of tourism in general, is people come in and they don't understand what they're doing, and they don't stick to groups anymore. And there's just so many more of them. We have a lot more human beings in the world now than we used to. And there's places people are going to that, like if you go to Rome, there's a tour group. You don't just like wander into someone's house.
Right.
You go to the Colosseum when it's open. There's rules that you follow. There are places that you eat and places you stay and etc. And we don't have that same setup here in the West, particularly. It's still fairly rustic, and we're struggling with finances. And the fact of the matter is that we don't have that long history of having tourists in a safe way. So we have people blundering through. If you come to the city, people laugh at the country bumpkins or the tourists because, oh, look at them. Did you leave your door unlocked, or did you look at you wandering over there? Wow, that's a bog. But they'll discover that soon. Hardy har har. But it's not funny when you have the country fair, which we have in our area, a ton of those folks coming in, and they're just treating it like it's a place where they can just get drunk or get stoned and leave their trash wherever, and then they leave. And it isn't funny to us that end up having to pick up the trash. It's not funny to us that end up having to deal with the last of that remnants. And for you're in a very delicate situation. And I'm really, really grateful that you're offering that help to people. What other things do you want people that come through to know about it?
Well, I definitely this is one thing I encourage is taking a trash bag with you, because I find whenever I wildcraft, depending upon the area, there's this one area I have to hike through that's, there's a lot of traffic. And unfortunately, there's a lot of folks that go there, and it's sad that people leave diapers, people leave their food, they just leave. So I organized this cleanup like last fall.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of those that you've done. And
so I just want to educate people that like take a trash bag, like take a trash bag with you when you go foraging, because I assure you're going to find something. Like I find trash wherever I go, unfortunately, and it's because people are not educating themselves and not becoming aware. I do want to encourage like learning about the plants, making sure when's the season to harvest, because you don't want to harvest something that's not ready. There's certain plants that like are better to harvest from in the spring than it is like in the fall. So education plus being mindful, and have a connection with the plant. I ask permission, like I said earlier. I have this whole ceremony that I have with the plants. I mean, it just takes me forever to harvest, but I definitely ask permission, offer water. There's something special that I offer to the plant to show appreciation to. Mm-hmm. And one of the things is like I do pick up the trash. It makes me really sad, and it's very upsetting. And I see a lot of people that are just no education. They don't know how to behave in nature, and we can't correct all of that. We could only educate. So if we could be an example to others with our actions, like picking up trash will show others and shame them. So it's like if I can shame you without saying a word, so I'm picking up your diaper, okay, I'll do it.
That's a good idea about bringing the water in as an offering, because when you take that plant matter, you are taking the product of all of that water that the plant had to work very hard to take. So you've got some favorites: your white sage, creosote, desert lavender.
Actually, white sage is on the harvest list.
Yeah,
white sage and Rivermonts are no harvest.
No harvest.
Yeah. White sage is something that's over harvested. Many people, it's a trend about having sage wands now, the smudging wands, and I encourage folks to purchase them from people that are actually growing, for that purpose,
Right. Good idea.
It makes me upset to see a sage wand bundle, and it's cool. Like people think it's so cool. Like, oh, I've got a smudge wand, but they don't know really why they have it. They just, for me, it's like, that's medicine. And that, for me, white sage is something that's great. Like my mother who gets hot flashes, I make her a cup of white sage tea, and that will help her like hot flashes. It will immediately stop the sweats that she gets at night. So it's medicine. And for me, I think it's like, we don't need to, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of smudge wands, I have them, but I purchase them from sources that are like growing them, and I know who these people are. So
And for those
Please
that
don't
are
do it.
listening and they're struggling with hot flashes, regular culinary sage is also on that list of things that work with that.
Definitely,
so you don't have
definitely.
to get, you yourself, Christina, you've got it growing in your area and you have your relationship with that. And people living in other areas may have, like Candace and I, we both have sage officinalis growing in our gardens. So that's where our relationship is. And with herbalism, we always say over and over again, it's part of the relationship, having a good relationship.
Now, a word from Thomas Easley about the Journal of Functional Herbalism.
The Journal of Functional Herbalism is a free online journal promoting the integration of traditional Western herbalism, clinical nutrition, and functional medicine. It's published by the Eclectic School of Herbal Medicine, and you can find the Journal of Functional Herbalism at functionalherbalism.com.
So what are some of these other herbs that you like that you have?
We talked about creosote bush. We talked about desert lavender. One of the ones I'm thinking about is pinyon pine, which I realize it's not really a spring one as much, is it? It's kind of more of a fall.
Because you're using the
right?
cone.
But tell me.
Pinyon pine is awesome. I mean, you could even harvest pinyon pine even in the spring, the winter, because it's an evergreen. So the leaves, the needles are still medicinal.
Yeah, those
and so
needles are
I am high in vitamin C. This is something that I like to use for the cold and flu season. But the resin is something like I love to work with, and that's another thing that people need to learn about when you're harvesting. When you're wildcrafting resin, don't take the resin from the tree. You're going to expose it to,
bacteria,
more injury. You could actually kill the tree, bacteria, so forth, and critters getting into it. So it's, for me, the resin is representation of the plant's life force. The tree, and it's the deepest. I feel like it's like the blood. So I respect that. And when I'm gathering resin, which I use a lot of I work with pinyon pine resin oil a lot. I make a lot of that oil, but I look at the base of the trunk. I look at the tree. I look above me. I see where there's, the resin falling, and I look on the ground, and then I just dig and sift through the dirt. So, and the beautiful thing is if you get one that has a lot of twigs, dirt attached to it, when you're making a resin oil, it all like floats to the top, and so you can, when you're decanting, it just all it goes away, and you have this beautiful, pure, golden, beautiful oil. Nice. So pinyon pine is something I like to work with. I like to work with pinyon pine cones, especially in the pinyon pine cone syrup that I make with unripe cones.
That sounds so tasty.
So, give us an idea of what that is.
Yeah,
please
tell me about that.
So I had read a long time ago, it was a while back, about making a pinyon pine cone syrup using unripe cones. So right at the point where they're just unripe, and it's a perfect time of year. And I want to say we do this probably in early September, like I think maybe early September. We gather them, and they're still green. Their clothes are perfect. And I just fill a mason jar up, and I add brown sugar. But I've also added coconut sugar to it before. You could add whatever, and I found that it works. But I sit it in the sun, or you could just, for me, I sit in the sun, or you could do like a hot water bath, and it sweats and eventually will make a syrup. But for me, being in the desert, I find the most sunniest spot, and I sit it there. And I want to say in a week after we gathered a bunch of the pine cones, we had this delicious and like sweet syrup. Now it could be like, we discussed about it earlier in the last interview, or before we were chatting, that it'd be great for great medicine for children.
Yeah. So so you take a glass jar, or whatever jar you're using, but I'm assuming a glass jar, and you put your your green pine cones, pinyon pine cones in there, and then you cover it with like sugar, or are you covering it with like a syrup that's already liquid, or are you covering it just with brown sugar?
No, I covered it. Well, I've done this twice. One was with brown sugar, and then another batch was made with coconut sugar.
And either way, are you adding any water to this?
I'm not adding anything. I just make sure it's sitting in the hot sun. So what I did was I sat it on concrete. Yeah, and I let the sun. And I've read different things where people say don't put it in the sun, but when I didn't put it in the sun, when I had partial sun and more shade, it didn't, break down as well, and the batch that didn't break down, what I ended up doing was blending the pine cones together with the brown sugar, sifting it through, and I ended up with this beautiful pinyon pine infused brown or coconut sugar.
Oh, that sounds tasty
beautiful.
too. Actually.
It's tasty. So this is something that I work with more as when I'm cooking, culinary, when I'm making special dishes, I go to those. It's my special batch for special events.
Nice. I could see how you could potentially do that with honey, but it would already be like, it would just start off syrupy, It
would start off syrupy. I thought about doing it with honey, but I wasn't sure how long it would take to break down. The thing that I liked about when once the pine cones opened, the pine nuts were released. You could we were actually the other night eating dinner with some friends. I made a dessert with this, but I dressed some of the plates with the pine cones and we're sharing, breaking them apart and like eating the pine nuts that were so sweet and so amazing. And it makes you appreciate why they're so expensive in the store. Like all the work that it takes to pick one out. It's hard work, but you appreciate it when you do it yourself. And then we were even eating the cone itself because it seemed to break down. It was softer and it was so sweet. So next year I'll send you some when it's that time. I'll gather some because
I'll be waiting at the mailbox when that comes.
They're lovely, but the pinyon pine it's great medicine. I've made tinctures using the resin before, but I found making tincture with the needles was a little bit easier. It's a messy process working with it, but something
have you
that
used it as a topical at all? Have you used pine for topical?
Yeah, I do.
How does that up here? I have Douglas fir and that, so I use that as my topical, like for warming and a warming oil. How about the pinyon pine? How has that worked for you?
It's a warming oil. This is one of the. It's in the pinyon pine resin oil is something that I made in my warming vibes that I have.
Nice.
It's something, and it's also in another healing one. It's called Wound Kiss, but it is warming and it's drawing. It's stimulating the blood circulation. I find that if I have achy joints, my mom who has arthritis, this is something that works for her. I climb a lot, so I'm always achy after we climb. So this is something that, we put on and it does help. It stimulates that blood flow and it does help warm that area and it's comforting. It's like, I don't want to say it's not as burning as some of the topicals that are out in the market that people buy when they're having achy joints and muscles, but it's a nice warming sensation that it doesn't hurt to put it on and you don't freeze when you walk into a cold room. It's very lovely and it smells so good too. I actually use it as a perfume.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, I got to ask you, desert willow, plant or tree or bush?
It's actually a tree.
Is it?
And it's a tree, yeah. And the thing I like about desert willow is I actually want to start this hiking group because there's been folks that have died out hiking the desert because they don't know how to survive. But if you're stuck in the desert willow thrives in washes. In waterways. So she is a water hog. That's what I call her. So where desert willow is, there's going to be some water. And if you're stuck in the desert, you can sustain yourself by like eating some of her flowers. They're very delicious. And the smell is intoxicating. It's like this musky, wonderful smell that I would love to capture and make a perfume out of someday. I don't know how to do that, but it's something I've been talking to another herbalist about, like different ways to make it happen. But she's also very medicinal as well. I like to use her as more when I'm dealing with sore throats. Bronchitis is something that I work with her more. So because she does mucilage in the plant. So I find that it's very coating and soothing. And especially if you've got that sore throat, the tail end of a cold and it still lingers, this is something that she's wonderful to work with.
Oh, that sounds really nice.
And she's antifungal. So this is another blend that I've used for yoni steaming. working with candida. You could also use it for a sitz bath if you don't know how to yoni steam. You can make an infusion of desert willow, and this is something that we could work with, when we're treating yeast infections and so forth.
Okay, so we've talked about yoni steam twice now. You're going to have to tell us exactly what that is, because I think for many of our listeners, for me, that was like, I didn't understand at all for a while when I first encountered that term in practice. So explain.
Okay. So yoni steaming, I was introduced to by a gal. Her company is called Steamy Chick. And she's an amazing woman. Her name is Kelly. And she's a sweet woman who basically using plants to address certain issues that women deal with. I used to have a lot of, issues with candida, and I was always given over-the-counter medicine, and it was really hard, because I would take this medicine, and it just seems like it was my diet, basically. I used to eat really bad, and then I discovered yoni steaming. So this is something I made my own. Kelly does offer through her website, steamychick.com. She does offer yoni seats that you could buy, or yoni thrones.
Okay, so we're gonna get really like explicit here. How does a yoni steam work? You got your plant herbs. Then what?
You got your plant herbs. So you want to pick the plants that are going to work with what's going on. So if I'm dealing with candida, yeast infection, I'm going to work with some astringent plants. Sure. And what I do is I boil a pot of hot water like I would make an infusion, and I take about half an ounce to an ounce of each plant, and I make a tea or a strong infusion. Now I do this, I'm all about saving money. I don't want to spend money on stuff that I don't need to have. And sure, I don't want to create extra clutter. So I have a Dutch oven. And what I do is I have 2x4s that I stack on top to create like a seat. So I could sit on so I don't burn my bum. And I basically I get naked and I wrap myself up in a big blanket. I have a large skirt that I bought at the thrift shop that I cover up to my chest, and I just throw over to create a tent. Okay. And I wrap myself up in a blanket. My head's the only thing that's exposed, and I sit. It's almost like being in a sweat lodge.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's kind of like creating a mini sweat lodge for your nether regions.
For your yoni.
Yeah.
It's a yoni facial. So, but what I found was by working with yoni steaming in conjunction with other methods, like I'm a fan of, making garlic suppositories to help address those issues. And I found that I didn't have issues with, yeast infections as much anymore. And and
you changed your diet at the same time, right?
I changed my diet.
Yeah,
this is when I began. Not as much sugar. And I cutting on carbs. Yeah, diet is a big part of it. And also, I used to love to drink a lot of wine, and hydration's another thing. Mm-hmm. So our diet changes, but also it's like what plants we're taking in. It's not only like the steaming that's going to help. It will help you, but I find that working with nourishing herbs and making herbal infusions and drinking infusions every day also helped me get over a lot of the problems I was having.
That makes sense. I was just reading about treating candida through Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine's approach to it. And I mean, one of the things that I was listening to reading Leslie Tiara's books, and one of the things she emphasized was that if you're dealing with candida, whether it's yeast infections in your vaginal area or anywhere else, diet is the key. You can treat the infection topically and get it to go away, but ultimately you really need to change your diet.
And anytime we're dealing with stuff with steam, whether it's a facial steam or a yoni steam, there are some dangers.
I keep thinking that seems awfully like, could you scald yourself accidentally?
I've talked to people that have tried it and they had unpleasant experiences, particularly for that delicate area. Could you address some of those safety precautions?
So one thing that I do, I should have touched on that. Yeah. I cover the pot, because I want to trap the steam in there, and I let it settle for a while. So I'm not, maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes after I make my herbal infusion, for the yoni steam, will I do it? But I also can tell, like, if it's still steaming after 20 minutes, but it's still really hot, if you get that water just really boiling, I don't sit on it for almost an hour sometimes. I feel like sometimes it's too hot that I've burned myself. But the first time I ever tried it, the first time I ever done a yoni steam. And I learned from reading other blogs on Steamy Chick's website of how to control it. So I definitely, for myself, I don't sit right directly over it. That's why I create like a stack, almost like, what's that game where you stack all the little wood chips and you try to pull,
or not Tetris, Jenga.
Jenga. Yeah.
Jenga, yeah. So Jenga your Dutch oven into your yoni pot. And that's what I do, is I make sure that when I'm stacking these 2x4s, this is something I create at home, but folks, there's websites that create yoni seats. I can make my own, so that I'm more creative. So I stack them, and I don't sit right on it right away. I wait for a while, because you can burn yourself.
Yeah, that was one of the things I wondered, because I mean, I do facial steams when we've got like colds and flus, especially if sinuses are getting really clogged and closed. I'll often pull out the bowl and boil the water, throw the herbs in there, and then you grab the towel, put it over a tent, and you're breathing it in, kind of like the old timey movies. So I was thinking, wow, that stuff's pretty hot, but my face is weathered, as it were, because it's always exposed to the outer elements. Yoni area, not so much so. Yeah. That sounds like that could be really scalding. So.
It is. It's you definitely have to take it. I don't encourage anybody to just do this at home without doing research. I was actually in herbalist school when this was happening. I was doing this, learning about how to make my own pot, because I've tried everything from Pyrex deep dish bowls. Like I get real creative of how to make a rig happen, but that's just, I'm that kind of a person. But I definitely know that you can burn yourself. So careful, if you're starting out and you're unsure, I would
don't put cayenne in there.
Yeah.
Don't put cayenne.
It does sound like thinking in terms of thinking of it as like a mini sweat lodge or a sauna, a damp sauna, being careful and being smart about how much you expose yourself and, all of that. Backing off, knowing it's okay to do it for just a few seconds. And if it's too hot, step away,
Yeah. It's such a delicate area.
It's such a delicate area.
We tell people when they do steams is close your eyes. That's really delicate tissue. And just because something's from nature doesn't mean it's something you should stick in your eye.
Yeah.
Just because something's from nature doesn't mean it's something you should stick in your underwear. Like, just don't make those assumptions. So I will, for transparency's sake, let you know this is way out of my comfort level.
Yeah, Sue's been squirming over here.
I'm completely squirming. So I strongly advise people like you said, do your research. I don't know of it as being a traditional, although I understand in Thailand people are doing this. I don't know of it as being a traditional method for working with folks. And I really, really strongly recommend people talk to folks that know. Don't just stick a hot pot in your butt and then call it good.
Yeah.
Unpleasant things may happen. At the same time, I'm always open to hearing how new ways of handling what our changing culture is like. It's good to find out new things. So
it definitely is. And there's a whole process to it, that you want to lay down after a yoni steam. So I've been talking about yoni steaming because I've discussed like the herbs that help candida, but I definitely encourage people to not do this themselves. Seek a professional that knows more about it before you try it on your own.
Or do your research. Just like before you go into the desert to do wildcrafting, make sure you do your extensive research.
Definitely
be smart.
Yep.
So there are definitely at least a couple others. I remember you mentioned you were interested in talking a little bit about desert mallow, and I think there was possibly one other.
The chaparral.
Well, we discussed that we kind
brittle
of touched
bush.
on it.
I think brittle bush was the other one. I think brittle bush
was the other one. We discussed desert. Did we just? Yeah, we discussed desert lavender. Sagebrush is one that I really love.
Okay.
That is in abundance to us here as well. Sagebrush, I actually make a bitters because I have a sensitive stomach. So this is something that I love to add sagebrush to. But sagebrush has many medicinal uses. And this is something like if you're trying to break a fever, she's a diaphoretic that you can work with. If you drink her warm, she's also pain relieving. It's an expectorant. So I feel like this plant is
Wow.
And I can harvest this plant at any time. Like I've harvested her in the winter, but it's better to do it in the late spring, I found. But she's very antimicrobial as well. I've actually worked with her when I'm working with people that are experiencing dandruff because it's also antifungal. So this is something that I can make an infusion with oil. You could do olive oil, coconut oil, whatever menstruum you choose. And I found that she's, her properties being an antifungal is very great to apply to the scalp topically if you're experiencing any issues with psoriasis, as well as the dandruff that I've noticed an issue within my industry with being a hairdresser.
Yeah.
Hard water dandruff kind of stuff.
Definitely. And she's great for anybody that's experiencing any type of gastric cramps, any type of gassy cramps. That's why I work with this plant for being a bitter. Even if you were to drink a tea, she's really great for that as well. But I found the most success with working with this plant for any type of, like, if you have a cut, any type of like wounds that you want to heal. Something that I noticed when I cut myself pretty bad last fall is I'm a slow healer for some reason, but when I work with sagebrush, I noticed that I kind of heal up right away. Like my cuts are gone, and I want to say within a week. Well, actually, yeah, probably within a week. I feel like I'm pretty cleared up. But this is something that I don't like to drink as a tea. It's really strong.
Yeah, it is an artemisia. Strong. Yeah.
So last, like working with, like we discussed your basanta, how you use too much, Candace.
Yeah.
Like working, you'd only need a little bit of this plant to work with for it to even, be effective. And so I've had friends in the past have had delayed, menses, and this is something that I did make to help stimulate. So she definitely stimulates, our moon, and it's too much. Like if it's too much, it's too strong, and it's not a very pleasant tea to drink. But it
seems
wonderful.
like a lot of desert herbs are ones that you should start with just a small amount. And then work up if it makes sense. But a lot of them, it sounds like a lot of them, I mean, they're small and they pack a lot of punch into every square millimeter, really.
And I don't know if that's just, it's weird. It's like that with every plant that I've worked with up here in the high desert. It's like pinyon pine, juniper, working with sagebrush. I find our creosote as well. It's like less is more with these plants. So when people are working with them, like you don't need to take an ounce of it like you would with nettle, to actually get a medicinal, if you're making an infusion, it's like you really don't need it to be that powerful.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, truly, it's a radically different ecosystem from an area like the one that I live in, where we have an abundance of water. So things will grow big and they expand. And per square millimeter, there's less densely packed essential oils, less densely packed nutrition, whatever it is you're looking at. And in the desert, there's so little water, everything that's grown there has learned how to pack everything it's got into the smallest possible space so it can keep itself as small as possible. So there's the least amount of dehydration or water respiration, water going out. So that means all the medicinal qualities are going to be packed into a tiny, tiny space comparatively.
Yep,
definitely. And it's like you said, with being, I guess it's just like the lack of water that we have here. I mean, we've had a good rain season last year, and even with that, it's just you really don't need that much, because these plants are still going to behave and be in this, act in the same way. They're still going to be very powerful. So this is, for me, the desert's very powerful medicine, both spiritually and on the physical level. For me, this is just really strong medicine that the desert has to offer.
Yeah, I really appreciate you spinning it. Is there any more things that you want to add for anyone who's doing wild crafting or visiting of the
I was
desert?
going to say that the three like really big rules that I've got here that, and some of them are kind of the same everywhere, like leave the plant as if you were never there.
Exactly.
Truly, that's the same everywhere, but I think it's more intense in the desert because the plants are so small and everything is, right out there in the open. So you don't want to leave your footprints behind. Ask permission, harvest properly, read up, be mindful, make a good offering. All of that is much the same as everywhere else, except that offering water is really, I think that's wonderful. I love that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And the thing that I think is like the most potent thing is the idea that less is more. The desert's powerful medicine and you need very little of it.
Yeah, you definitely need less. You don't have to gather so much. So I feel like you touched on everything when it comes to like wildcrafting here. Just be very mindful. And one thing is, I don't tell, like I try not to. Social media is a big thing, and I notice with a lot of herbalists, a lot of wildcrafters, we're not sharing the locations that we're necessarily, gathering. I know I don't, because I don't want it to become oversaturated with folks just with this new interest in herbalism and their lack of education. So I really urge people, like, for instance, Michael Moore is great, and so is Charles W. Kane, and there's so many other herbalists out there that talk about desert plants and how to harvest them. Kiva Rose, being where she lives, she still has some plants like juniper where she lives, but she does talk a lot about how to harvest. So I really feel like folks need to educate themselves before they get the bug to just try to come out in the desert, because we're not thriving. It's so dry up here.
Yeah.
And it's not like going into the woods. It's not like that here. It's very dry. So you want to make sure that you're gathering these plants at the right time of year, because it's sometimes more medicinal to harvest, in the winter for some plants or in the spring and others, or late summer. So just education is key. I've always said that.
I can see how, especially because of the dryness of the desert, that probably makes a much bigger difference than it does in the more lush areas of the country. So, you can get away with, harvesting nettles at the beginning, middle, or you really shouldn't do it at the very end of the season.
Once it starts producing flowers,
off. But but even then, it all depends on what you're harvesting them for.
Right. If you're harvesting nettle flower, for example,
or the
that
seed,
would be the time.
Or the seed. But but you can get away with more of that. It's a wider circle of how long you can harvest, because it is so lush, and the climate change is not. The desert's a harsh climate.
It's not as forgiving.
Definitely harsh. And make sure you're dressed properly. I make sure to wear take lots of water so you can offer the plants, and make sure you're well hydrated, because
let people know where you are.
And know where you're at. But make sure you wear proper clothing when you're doing it, because it's pretty brutal out here.
Yeah,
it's pretty brutal.
In Oregon, we lose people on mushroom hunts all the time. Mushrooms have become the big deal, and we have more and more people running around in the wilderness, looking down at their feet, not looking at where they are. And every year we lose a mushroom hunter.
That's something that I want to get more into, is mushrooms. We obviously don't have them here.
Yeah, definitely not. Maybe. No, probably not.
There's some cool mushrooms that even grow in dunes.
Yeah, I have heard of that.
Yeah, you got to know where to look, though.
Yes.
Yeah, what? I think I've seen a mushroom here and there, but I don't know what, they are. I only see them when I'm backpacking or I'm in the mountains. I don't really see them where we're at.
Yeah, best to leave mushrooms alone until you have someone who can show you for sure what you're looking at. Because, making the wrong choice with a mushroom can be deadly.
Yep.
And the wrong choice is so easy to make. I mean, it's scary easy to make. Yeah. So
you don't have to stick everything in your mouth.
But
just enjoy it.
Right now I'm thinking the desert sounds like a fun place to be going.
Oh, yes.
It sounds like a magical and powerful place to be going.
Oh, it is. It is. And Joshua Tree has really, since I first moved here, it's grown a lot. So it's just beautiful. I feel like we have the most epic sunrises and sunsets, and the stars are beautiful. So
there's a clarity that comes. There's a clarity that comes with the desert.
Crisp air.
Yeah.
It's
So-
desert medicine.
Thank
Yeah.
you very much for being with us and sharing your wisdom. And
How would people get a
Thank
hold of
you.
you?
how do people get a hold of you?
I have a website. It's everyleafspeaks.com, and there's links on my website to my social media. I've been bad with Twitter. It's really hard. I know you're great, Candace. You're great, Candace, with Twitter. But yeah, I do have that. Facebook and Instagram, of course. But I'll get better about Twitter. But there's all links on my website, and I have an online store in which I'll be offering pretty soon. Desert medicine to buy in bulk and dry bulk. So yeah, I'm getting busy now that we're in that season again to start wildcrafting.
Yay. Well,
Yeah,
thank
I'm
you so
excited.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you, Patrick.
The statements made about herbs and products on this podcast have not been evaluated by the United States Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. All information provided on this podcast or any affiliated websites is for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for advice from your physician or other healthcare professional. You should not use the information on this podcast and its affiliated websites for a diagnosis or treatment of any health problem. Always consult with a healthcare professional before starting any new vitamins, supplements, diet, or exercise program before taking any medication, or if you have or suspect you might have a health problem. Any testimonials, questions, or case studies are based on individual results and do not constitute a guarantee that you will achieve the same results.